The story begins with Sasaki taking out the trash early in the morning, trying not to make any noise so as not to wake up his neighbors. He notices a black raven sitting on the roof and tries to shoo it away by waving his arms. At that moment, a strange girl approaches him, smiles and wishes him a good morning, and then quickly leaves, leaving him slightly confused. The raven he was trying to shoo away comes down to the trash bag, starts to pick it apart with its beak, and then suddenly flies away, as if someone called it. Sasaki goes to work, goes down to the subway and gets on a train, where he takes out his phone to check the news. He scrolls through the headlines, but finds nothing interesting. When he gets to the office, he turns on his computer and gets ready for the day, when a colleague approaches him and asks to look at the approval form. They study the document together and decide to correct one part, because the previous boss was not very attentive to details, and now it is important to clarify everything. Sasaki offers to help and advises his partner to do other things, arguing that it is important to properly distribute resources and that everyone should do what causes the least stress. Behind him, two girls are discussing their pets, and one of them admits that she cannot imagine life without her pet. Sasaki is interested in their conversation and secretly starts peeking at videos of animals on his phone, feeling touched, although he himself has always loved dogs more. At this moment, he is distracted by a man who asks him to take on a case related to school. It was an ordinary day, nothing special. Sasaki worked in a small trading company, of which there were a great many in the city. Their sales were average, as was the salary, and they almost did not pay for overtime, so he could barely make ends meet. On the way home, he stops at a store and pays for onigiri with a card, saving every penny. Sitting on a bench near the entrance, he reflects that there are many reasons to hold on to this place despite all the difficulties. Sasaki went through the so-called lost decades, and knows how cruel the world can be, so now he is just happy that he has at least some kind of work. He feels that he is useful, even if it is small, and is grateful for it. His colleagues offer to go out for a bite to eat, but he declines. There is little money, and he needs to somehow live on, so he decides that he will go next time. In the evening, returning from work, he goes into the store and, finding a discount coupon, involuntarily smiles. Walking home, he notices that the same girl who wished him good morning in the morning is sitting on the next bench. At home, he sits down to dinner, turns on a video with animals and is surprised at how cute they are. The next day, he decides to go to a pet store, approaches the enclosures with dogs and cats, but the prices for them hit his budget. In addition, he was informed that the rent would soon be raised. He is poor, but he really wants a golden retriever. Suddenly, his attention is drawn to a bird that is inexpensive. It tilts its head and looks at him as if asking him to choose it. Sasaki cannot contain his affection and buys it. At home, he puts up a cage, fills it with water, puts in some food, and lets the bird out. After washing himself, he sits down with a drink and thinks about what name to give it. Suddenly, the bird opens its beak and says, "I am Pier Carlo, the star sage from the other world." Sasaki is shocked. He read that some birds can imitate speech, but he did not expect this. The chick continues to chatter, repeating its name several times, insisting that it is not an ordinary bird. The protagonist decides to name it Peeps, but the bird clearly does not like this, and it gets angry. Sasaki remembers that Yamada from the pet store said that the animal will sit on your hand when it begins to trust. He really wants to believe it, but now he understands that the bird is capable of more, for example, verbal communication. Pai declares that she wants a fillet of Chateau Kobe beef, because Yamadu mentioned to her that it is the greatest food in the world. She calls the bird food. Rare, disgusting. Sasaki apologizes. He cannot afford such meat, it is too expensive. He offers pork ribs, but the bird interrupts him and offers to get rich. It turns out that Pai was banished from his world and now wants to return. To live here, he needs an accomplice, and if Sasaki agrees to help, he will receive a lot of money. A pentagram appears around them, and Pai gives him a piece of his power. Sasaki feels warmth in his chest. This is magic. He opens the cage, although he does not fully understand what is happening. Pai climbs onto his shoulder. Now Sasaki's body serves as a conductor for magic. The next moment, they are teleported to a medieval city where people walk around in old clothes. This is the world where Pai lived before he became a bird, and this city is the outskirts of the bird's kingdom. The next day, Sasaki comes to work earlier than everyone else. The others were almost late due to train delays. A colleague notices that he looks more cheerful and jokes that he probably goes to the gym in the mornings now. Then he calls him to talk outside. It turns out that he wants to offer him to quit and join his new team, where the conditions are better. Sasaki refuses, explaining that there will soon be changes in his life. He got a pet. The colleague looks at him with disbelief, but it is true. Because of the bird, he will soon not be able to sleep. Since he met Pai and visited his world, his life has changed. Now he can teleport, avoiding rush hours, and this makes his everyday life easier. He also got the idea of interworld trade. If he could arrange supplies of goods for the nobility, he could get rich. It's still a long way off, but he has already made an agreement with one trading company. Having drawn a lottery ticket, he understands that luck is on his side. Soon he is dragging heavy bags of goods, and he is met by a girl who explains that her mother brought a man, although she herself was hungry. He treats her to a chocolate bar that he won in the store. He is introduced to the ruler of the city, who immediately buys the goods. Sasaki gets the privilege of visiting the estate whenever he wants, but first he must show the goods and only then sell them. This way he can make a good markup. Returning to his world, he finds himself at a farewell party in honor of his dismissal. Friends notice that he looks different, as if the aura has changed. Sasaki realizes that he simply began to sleep better in another world, where the bed is softer. The boss offers him a drink, and at the end of the evening Sasaki goes home. Suddenly, ice floes appear next to him, and one of the guy's hand becomes covered in frost. He attacks him with an ice floe to prevent the blow, but he doesn't know how to stop the freezing. It could kill a person. Luckily, a girl appears, removes the ice and takes out a gun. Hashizaki handcuffs the criminal and calls his superiors. Sasaki gets permission to go home for a change of clothes. He has a long night ahead. Pai doesn't feel any mana in her. Perhaps there is something similar to magic in this world, but it works differently. Leaving the house, Sasaki meets a girl looking at the drawings. In the car, she explains that espers are people whose power awakens on its own, and they are similar to wizards. There are 1 in 100,000 of them. She can not only create water, but also change its temperature. Everyone has different powers. Some can destroy a city, and some can only destroy a house. Everyone is required to register. They are brought to the National Bureau of Anomaly Control, where Sasaki will now work. He is told that he has become a civil servant with a good salary, and if he proves himself, he will receive awards. Hashizaki explains that their salary depends on their success, and that they are ideal as partners. Later, while they are walking, Pai feels that they are being followed. Sasaki decides to teleport to another world to settle the matter with the goods, and also to give the money to French. In the morning, a girl comes to him and asks to keep her company, but the boss sends her back. Sasaki must undergo training. He is told that there may be emergency calls, and since there is no network in that world, they will not be able to track him. In the bureau, the employees have the status of ordinary police sergeants. After training, he is given an amount for the necessary purchases. Near his house, a girl meets him with cookies. She made them in labor class. At home, Pai squeals, demanding a walk. It turns out that while Sasaki was away, strangers visited the apartment and installed something. They find cameras and bugs, and at that moment Hashizaki calls. Many do not approve of the organization's methods, and this test showed everything. After finishing the conversation, they decide to postpone the purchases. It's too late. They are in another world, where Sasaki is diligently mastering a mid-level spell, and his progress is truly impressive, because most students need at least 10 days to achieve such results. In the current lesson, he is focused on studying healing magic and electricity magic, although the process of memorizing runes and formulas seems incredibly boring to him. Pai, observing his efforts, suggests a more effective way of learning from grimoires, or more precisely, from ancient magic books, which, as it turned out, could be found in digital form right on his phone. Initially, they plan to go to French to have a little snack and take a break from training. They give the merchant several phones that run on portable batteries and hold a charge for about a day. Trade in imported goods is on the rise, and Sasaki is glad that the goods do not lie on the shelves, but quickly find their buyers. He apologizes to the merchant for the long absence of new supplies, but the merchant only waves his hand, understanding that such things take time. The merchant asks to bring him all the available phones for further sale and promises to make the most favorable offers to noble clients. On the orders of Miller, an influential person in this world, he must buy up all the quality goods he can find. However, the situation is complicated by the fact that relations with neighboring countries are becoming increasingly tense, and many are already preparing for a possible conflict. It was already late evening when Sasaki walked along a narrow street where local children frolicked, their laughter carried in the silence. Suddenly he is called out. It turns out that it is French, who is clearly excited about something. Sasaki is surprised, because the restaurant is full of customers, and business, it would seem, is going well. He hands French a monthly payment, and hands over several new recipes that can be useful in the restaurant business. After that, he and Pai eat their fill of French's delicious dishes and, satisfied, return to the modern world. The protagonist is fast asleep when he is suddenly awakened by a call from a girl from the bureau. A new assignment has arrived. Sasaki, rubbing his eyes, apologizes for being late, explaining that he slept so soundly that he simply did not hear the phone. When they meet, several guys pass by them, and the girl introduces a new employee. It turns out that they are talking about a mass incident with dissidents, a group of people with abilities, but who refuse to register with government agencies. Members of this group do not make contact, and one of them even used his power to harm ordinary people. The rest are only suspected of illegal activities. They have been under surveillance for a long time, but their hideout was discovered only recently, and now they need to prevent possible problems. They get into the car, and Sasaki is noticeably nervous. This is his first serious assignment, although he is told that he is unlikely to have to fight. The guys from the support group calm him down, claiming that the dissidents are just rabble and do not pose a real threat. Hashizaki, on the contrary, does not feel fear. The higher the risk, the more they pay, and for her this is a great chance to prove herself. Arriving at the place, they see an old abandoned building. All members of the group have their weapons at the ready, and shields protect them from possible attacks. The command to begin the operation is given, and they carefully enter inside. The girl loudly orders the dissidents to raise their hands and surrender, but in response only silence. No one was visible, and the guys begin to doubt what kind of tricks are these. Hashizaki has a bad feeling, and she suggests retreating, but at that moment a loud scream is heard, and the connection with the headquarters is suddenly cut off. The floor under their feet begins to tremble, and objects around rise into the air, as if caught by an invisible force. The next moment, a real tsunami of debris and furniture is formed. The guys clearly did not expect this development of events, and are trying to get out in a panic. Various objects are flying at them, and they fight back as best they can. Hashizaki shouts to Sasaki for help, and he, remembering recent lessons, creates an ice barrier. The girl quickly melts his magic, forming a water barrier around herself, which holds back the attack. The objects continue to rise into the air, and one of the guys is thrown to the floor, but Hashizaki manages to soften his fall with water. Sasaki screams for her to run. If he stays, he will almost certainly die, but without a water resource, she is also in danger. At the last moment, he decides to stay. Abandoning a comrade to certain death would be a crime, and this act will leave an indelible scar on his soul. A girl in a kimono comes out of the shadows, picks up Hashizaki and coldly warns him not to interfere. Suddenly, the hydrokinetic girl falls, but manages to create a water cushion around herself, softening the blow. Shizuka, that is the stranger's name, is surprised her opponent can control not only water, but also its temperature. The next moment, an attack flies at her, but she deftly dodges and rushes into a counterattack. Ice shards fly apart, but Shizuka decides to spare them. She demands that Sasaki introduce himself, if this girl is so important to him. He says his name, although she clearly does not like his face. The protagonist tries to start a dialogue, asking about the group of dissidents, and explains that he is just a newbie who does not understand the whole situation. Shizuka refuses to give his name, but her attention is drawn when Sasaki demonstrates electricity magic. She has never seen anything like it. Two stunned espers lie nearby, and Sasaki asks her not to talk about today's incident, promising in return not to harm them. Shizuka offers him to join their side, but he firmly refuses. In the end, she lets him and his allies go, and then disappears into the darkness. The boss at the bureau, after listening to the report, orders Sasaki to go home and get some rest. His first mission, and already such a serious rework. Later, Sasaki visits the girl, who, fortunately, was not injured. She wants to thank him and invites him to a restaurant. Over dinner, she again expresses her gratitude, and he, in turn, apologizes for the fact that he is not yet strong enough for serious battles. They order food, and the girl refuses alcohol. She is only 16 and still in school. In her free time, she tries to dress in such a way as not to attract unnecessary attention and not become an object of ridicule because of her age. After dinner, Sasaki decides to go home. It is already night outside. He is carrying bags of food in his hands, and the cold wind chills him to the bone. Suddenly, he notices a girl who seems to be looking for something to eat in the trash cans. The next moment, she appears on the roof, calmly chewing on the food she found. A strange portal appears near her, and before Sasaki can say anything, she disappears into the darkness. Pai is very surprised, his eyes wide open, when a real chateau of Kobe beef is placed in front of him, a dish he has been dreaming about so much. Sasaki, watching the birds' reaction, sincerely thanks them for everything they have done for them, and decides that since they have started celebrating, they should give themselves over to this moment completely. The bird incredibly likes the treat, every bite causes her delight, and the protagonist hurries to get out his phone to capture this funny scene. The protagonist goes to Miller, who meets him with a serious expression on his face and immediately gets down to business. The war will begin soon. The king has ordered Miller to go to the front lines. The situation looks grim. The enemy empire is huge, their army is numerous, and if the enemy reaches the city, there may be nothing left of it. So Miller turns to Sasaki for help, knowing that his exclusive goods can play a decisive role in the upcoming battles. Miller is well aware of the value of his items and plans to become the exclusive supplier for the army. However, collecting the necessary materials in a month and organizing their delivery is a nearly impossible task. Given the recent sharp rise in prices, and then their artificial reduction, this could destroy the local economy faster than the enemy troops do. The king personally asked Miller to provide the army with materials and provisions. Nobles in the service of the king are obliged to follow all orders unconditionally. Disobedience will result in the confiscation of their houses and lands. Miller dives into the historical background. About 100 years ago, Hertz was a prosperous kingdom with impressive achievements in the field of magic. However, greed and cruel exploitation by the nobles led to many magicians leaving the country. For a while, stability was maintained thanks to a star sage who selflessly worked for the good of the kingdom, but a few years ago, everything changed. A group of jealous nobles resented the king's special favor to the sage and organized his assassination. Since then, corruption has been eating away at the country, inexorably bringing it closer to collapse. Sasaki politely apologizes, but refuses the offer, preferring to stay out of these events. As the protagonist leaves the city, he is told that he can return whenever he wants. Pai, who has been listening attentively to the entire conversation, suggests that the kingdom will most likely lose this war. Sasaki would sincerely like to help, but he knows that they are powerless in the face of such large-scale events, although Pai's magical abilities could theoretically change the course of the war. However, the skirmish between the countries seems insignificant to him. He can conquer and destroy, but he prefers to build and maintain valuable relationships with this city. As they approach the restaurant, they notice angry foreign cooks leaving it. Inside, French sits at a table with a worried look and tells him that the former head chef demanded that supplies be sold at bargain prices. Although French values old connections, he firmly states that it was Sasaki who gave him this wonderful job and he will never betray him. The protagonist deep down thinks that he is nothing but trouble. Miller turns out to be right in his predictions. Food prices are rising by leaps and bounds, and drastic measures will soon have to be taken. As they enter the warehouse, Joseph notes with surprise that such large purchases are usually made only after the war has already begun. There is also alarming news from the south. Not only have food prices risen sharply, but social tension has also increased. Buying goods now and paying for their transportation will result in serious losses. The protagonist does not plan to cooperate with other companies and offers to pay with large gold coins of the Hertz kingdom. After some thought, Joseph agrees to such conditions. The entire warehouse, filled with various goods, is loaded in just a few days. Muller is sincerely touched and does not know how to thank Sasaki. These food supplies will really save many lives. The title of Star Sage, as Muller explains, appeared because that magician knew more spells than there are stars in the sky. In his entire life, Muller has never met a wiser person, although Pai is clearly embarrassed when he is addressed with such respect. In the evening, at dinner, Muller shares that he now has more free time, and sadly admits, "If I were braver, perhaps it would have been possible to save the Star Sage." On the way back, Pai is silent all evening, perhaps reflecting on Muller's words. Mark passes, with a pale face, and reports the shocking news: Muller has died. At the same time, the protagonist is at his boss, who apologizes for the urgent call and announces a promotion. Now Sasaki becomes a junior inspector. His new assignment is to work in tandem with Hashinzaki. Sasaki agrees without hesitation, realizing that it will be difficult for him to confront opponents and build relationships with them alone. At night, returning home, he meets a girl who joyfully greets him after a long absence. She offers to give him a shoulder massage. Although he always refused such offers before, this time he accepts it with gratitude. As a token of gratitude, he gives her buns that he himself will not have time to eat. Stepping over the threshold of the house, they notice that Pai is listening attentively to the news of a major fire. Sasaki offers the bird some tea, but Pai remains silent. There is an untouched cake on the table, and suddenly Pai begins to speak. "Muller and I were not close friends, but sometimes we drank together and talked. I thought he would live longer. Life, in Pai's opinion, is a constant movement towards death, and if you mourn every dead person, there will not be enough tears." They both worry about the fate of the city and decide to visit another world. First of all, they go to French. Fortunately, the former employer no longer bothers the cook, but many residents have already left the city after Muller's death. An agitated merchant runs up to them. They urgently need to discuss important matters. Elsa, Muller's daughter, with a lush hairstyle that seems about to fall apart, introduces two applicants for the post. According to her, one of them is completely stupid. They were invited because the lady's safety was at stake. The trading house was to take her under its wing until the situation in the country stabilized. After some thought, Elsa agreed, but she needed time to prepare. The protagonist was invited to question him about the phone and other items that allowed him to examine things in detail. Sebastian insistently asked to sell these items, although there was clearly something wrong with his behavior. Everything was going exactly according to plan, and there was absolutely no need to worry. Most of the nobles turned out to be greedy slackers, incapable of decisive action. If everything continued as smoothly, and most importantly if they managed to arrange the planned marriage, then the situation would finally turn out in their favor. Sebastian, looking at the phone in his hands with a satisfied grin, notes that he can now afford to live in luxury in retirement. Elsa, who has been living with them for several days, is happily gobbling up her favorite curry. French, trying to please the noble guest, accurately reproduces the dishes according to the recipes that were given to him. The girl is allowed to pet Pai, and to everyone's surprise, the bird not only does not resist, but also makes strange sounds, clearly expressing pleasure. Elsa freezes with her eyes wide open. She clearly heard words among these sounds. Sasaki, noticing her reaction, begins to frantically justify herself, claiming that she simply heard it wrong, but the girl no longer pays attention to his babble. At this moment, an agitated merchant bursts in, insistently demanding that Elsa urgently return to the estate. As proof of the seriousness of the situation, he shows 2 bloody swords allegedly belonging to her brothers. Sebastian, taking advantage of the moment, insists that the girl take over the family, threatening that in case of refusal, their home will cease to exist. After some hesitation, Elsa agrees, comforting herself with the thought that she will have helpers. Meanwhile, the town is gradually emptying. Many residents are leaving it forever, taking their belongings with them. The merchant, sighing heavily, explains the situation. The army is defeated, people are fleeing in panic, fearing the complete collapse of the town. Alarming news comes in. Soldiers of the enemy kingdom have already entered the border areas. Several carts with their goods have been spotted. The merchant himself is also going to leave in the coming days. They are sitting by the lake, and Pai suddenly asks Sasaki to turn the tide of the war. After a short discussion, they decide to wait until nightfall to use an unconventional approach. When darkness falls, they soar into the air. Later the protagonist will be taught this useful spell. Having landed near the field camp of the Empire, they decide to destroy the enemy with one crushing blow. Pai creates complex pentagrams, and in an instant the camp ceases to exist. All these deaths will remain on the bird's conscience, and Sasaki decides that it is better not to blame anyone for this. However, before they have time to catch their breath, a new attack falls upon them. Fortunately, Pai manages to create a protective shield. When the shield is destroyed, a mysterious girl materializes next to the bird. Sasaki falls to the ground, having managed to create a water cushion that softens the blow. An incredible battle between Pai and the stranger unfolds in the air. Meanwhile, wounded soldiers run up to the protagonist, and he, remembering his recently mastered skills, heals them with magic. At this moment, Muller appears, introducing his companion Adonis, the second prince of the Kingdom of Hertz. It turns out that they did not die, but simply separated from the main army, which is why they were considered dead. Muller asks to take them to the nearest settlement to sort out the situation. Suddenly, an arrow flies at them, but Sasaki instantly creates a protective barrier, saving everyone. An enemy army appears on the horizon, which Muller dispatches with one blow of his sword. A fire rages in the settlement. They are heading to the work of orcs who attack civilians. Upon seeing Sasaki, all the monsters rush at him, but he stops them with a powerful electric discharge. The rest of the warriors then join the battle, dealing with the enemies with surprising speed. They assume that the orcs are commanded by the higher regiment, and decide to stay close to Sasaki. Suddenly, a huge orc appears, rushing straight at them, but the protagonist manages to stop it. The monster tries to strike, while the others create a protective shield, giving Sasaki time to recover. A large stone falls from the sky, and Pai apologizes for the delay. The bird lifts many stones into the air, creating a powerful golem from them, which instantly deals with the enemy golem, and sends its fragments far into the sky. Muller, watching this, begins to suspect that Pai is a star mage, so similar are his manner of speech and style of magic. The bird greets everyone, and one of the soldiers falls to his knees in awe. Pai explains that the real star sage is indeed dead, and now he is just a pet of an ordinary person who wants to live a peaceful life. Sasaki asks everyone to keep the fact that the star sage is alive and well a secret. After that, they teleport back home, where they are greeted with general jubilation. Elsa is especially happy, rushing to meet them. Muller's sons appear. It turns out that they played their roles in this performance perfectly. The girl screams that one of them is a complete idiot, and she hates him. Muller reveals his cards. All this time they acted according to a carefully planned scenario. When the war began, people from his entourage began to behave suspiciously, and he deliberately spread a rumor about discord in the family. The sons masterfully staged a quarrel, supposedly leading to a bloody battle for the title. Sebastian, who turned out to be a traitor, dreamed of Muller's death in order to get their lands, planning to marry his son to Elsa. Now he is taken into custody as the main suspect. In the finale, Elsa approaches Sasaki and, looking into his eyes, sincerely thanks him for saving her father. Her voice trembles from overwhelming emotions, and there are tears of relief in her eyes. His neighbor, sitting at lunch in the school cafeteria, thoughtfully reflects on his strange lifestyle. In all the years of their acquaintance, he has never left the house for more than 3 days in a row, which seems extremely unusual to her. Returning home along the evening street, she suddenly notices a lifeless body of a girl against the wall, which takes her breath away. Soon the police arrive at the scene, cordon off the area and begin to sort out the circumstances of the incident. Nearby, 2 guys are animatedly discussing the main character. It turns out that he was seen running after Hashizaki, and according to rumors, he has water abilities, since he can create icicles. Sasaki, meanwhile, is immersed in studying his phone, thinking about his upcoming visit to the office. There was an error in his calculations. Having spent about 2 days in the past world, he did not take into account the time difference, which turned out to be more significant than he expected. Looking at the laptop, they are surprised to find good news. The war was ended, all disputes were settled, and Muller received an honorary position at the royal court. Adonis was entrusted with monitoring state finances, which speaks of a high level of trust. At that moment, the phone rings as Hashizaki reports a new mission. They have to recruit an Esper schoolboy who, according to investigators, can create flames. Interestingly, he never demonstrated his abilities at school, but there were cases of fires near his home and in other places. Arriving at the school under the guise of a capital commission assessing the level of education in the regions, they notice a guy in glasses in the window, that same Esper. Watching him, they see how hooligans approach him and begin to scold him for bringing little money, apparently extorting funds from him that he can no longer take from his mother. Hashizaki is about to intervene, but Sasaki stops her. Now it is more important to observe. It is obvious that the guy has been bullied for a long time, and that he deliberately holds back his abilities, especially at school, where there have never been incidents. The protagonist offers to contact him when he is alone. The situation is heating up. The guy is thrown to the ground, and he clenches his fists in despair. Sasaki barely restrains himself from interfering, realizing that they are dealing with a potential colleague, and public humiliation can cause irreparable damage to his self-esteem. Hashizaki decides to make contact herself, and Sasaki goes to fill out a report, after which he can rest a little. The protagonist settles down in a cafe with a cup of coffee and a laptop. He ironically notes the changes in his life before. In the office, he ate exclusively store-bought food, and now he sits in an expensive cafe. Life is really full of surprises. In the suburban supermarkets, where he sometimes drops in, there has always been a huge selection of products, which is very different from his previous opportunities. Meanwhile, the schoolboy sits down on a bench with a girl, and they discuss Pancake Day, apparently some kind of school event. Sasaki, watching them, notices that the girl has a very serious expression on her face, and it seems to him that he has seen her somewhere before. Suddenly, the same hooligans appear, offering the girl to hang out with them. The schoolboy jumps up and shouts that she is not interested, but in response receives a slap in the face from the girl herself. At this moment, the unexpected happens. The guy bursts into flames of such force that even a passing plane loses control and falls. Sasaki rushes to the crash site, creating an ice barrier so that the fragments do not fly apart and injure anyone. He notes with surprise to himself that he did not expect such cruelty from the girl, although outwardly she looked sweet and attractive. At the girl's request, he creates an ice barrier. While Hashizaki tells an amazing story, it turns out that there are 7 little sorceresses in the world who have special powers, and one of them is a Japanese woman who specializes in killing espers. At this moment, a fairy named Pink, familiar to Sasaki, appears, who, as it turns out, lives nearby and often picks up discarded products from the local supermarket. The company is joined by Shizuka, who is called Purple because of the color of her kimono. The girl sincerely wants to help, but Pink suddenly tries to attack. However, she misses. She climbs the dome of the building, looking with interest at what is happening below. Hashizaki counterattacks, piercing her with a water spear. A rapid firefight with magical attacks begins, and Sasaki shouts to the others to run. Shizuka deftly touches Pink's forehead, plunging her into unconsciousness. The protagonist and the girl decide to join forces to protect. Their coordinated actions make Pink doubt she is sure that Sasaki is an esper, although he categorically denies it, joking that he is just a little fairy. Shizuka appears behind him, trying to strike, but she is deftly neutralized and laid on the ground. A terrible detail comes to light. The sorceress does not have her own fairy because she killed it herself. The skin of the unfortunate creature now adorns her neck. As Pink admits, she never wanted to become a sorceress. Most of all, she is tormented by the question, why does Sasaki work with espers if they were the ones who destroyed her family? Meanwhile, a schoolboy froze at the bicycle parking lot, watching everything that was happening with wide-open eyes. The girl, realizing that the situation was getting out of control, decides to quietly leave, leaving the participants in the conflict to sort it out themselves. Suzuka sincerely thanked her for everything and expressed a desire to work for the same employer. She persistently asked to introduce her to the boss, since Sasaki aroused special interest in her. His ability to shoot icicles and use electricity seemed incredible to her. At that moment, a call came from the boss, who with obvious bewilderment asked what they were doing at all, especially after the incident with the downed plane. The protagonist hurried to explain that Purple had expressed a desire to join their team. After some thought, the boss agreed to the meeting, but on one condition: surveillance cameras would be installed in the room, which would later need to be removed, as this was part of the check for a potential spy. Deciding to temporarily put things aside, they headed to the store. Sasaki wanted to buy pickled plums, which he planned to add to a meat dish. When night fell, they were standing outside the building, and Hashizaki was looking curiously at the jar in his hands, clearly embarrassed by this purchase. Purple, as it turned out, was an A-class esper with a unique ability for energy vampirism and exceptional regeneration. They explained to him that, despite her youthful appearance, the girl was already many years old, and perhaps those plums in the jar were also not 1 year old. Hashizaki got into a heated argument with the boss about the cameras, accusing him of sexual harassment, although he, in her own words, was not into girls. The boss retorted that thanks to the cameras they had already managed to identify many spies, and the main character was clearly not in his circle of interests. Deciding to change the subject, the boss tried the pickled plums and was delighted they were some of the best he had ever eaten. Sasaki himself did not feel any particular love for them, but he admitted that after a drinking binge, eating rice soup with such plums was just the thing. Akutsu, a connoisseur of gastronomy, noticed that these plums were clearly pickled by a person with a refined taste. The girl, following their example, ate one plum and squealed from the unexpectedly bright taste. When the night was already drawing to an end and Sasaki was heading home, Purple suddenly appeared behind him. She asked to spend the night at his place, admitting that she had left a bug in his apartment and discovered a talking bird. The main character tried to play dumb, claiming that he knew nothing, but the girl gave him an ultimatum: either cooperation, or she would tell everything to the boss. Suzuka explained that she was hiding from her former comrades and wanted to unite with him, especially since she had significant financial resources and was ready to make a profitable deal. Sasaki thought about it and agreed, but stipulated that the final decision did not depend only on him. The morning began with a conversation between Pai and his newly made ally. The bird was hesitant at first, but when she found out that she would receive a fillet of Chateau once a month, she immediately gave her go-ahead. Pai proposed a barter form of cooperation. Since Suzuka had managed to make a fortune, it meant that she had connections with people capable of concluding large deals. These were the contacts they lacked now. No one was against this alliance, and Sasaki especially emphasized that he did not want to anger his current employer. The main headache was the question of how to transfer income between worlds. A call on a laptop followed, during which Purple negotiated with the boss. Akutsu expressed a desire to work with her on a contract basis, setting the condition that she would be under Sasaki's wing for her own safety. The boss was famous for promoting smart workers regardless of their experience. As a result, the protagonist received the same rights as Hashizaki. 2 promotions in a few weeks was an impressive result. Hashizaki happily noted that she could now drink at taxpayers' expense, calling it an unforgettable experience. Sasaki himself did not dare to try those very plums, but shared them with colleagues and witnessed many faces twisted from the taste. He asked Suzuka to lure his former comrades to their side, but she preferred to spread a rumor about an affair with a bureau agent. This turn of events clearly did not please the protagonist. He understood that cooperation with her would require full dedication. Suzuka knew about the magical field of sorceresses, a mysterious technique that allows you to move anywhere. Sasaki promised that if something happened to her, he would immediately come to the rescue. At that moment, Hashizaki appeared. The boss told her that she was now in charge of Purple, and she came to find out what kind of gatherings were being held there. Seeing them together, she suspected that Sasaki was getting his subordinate drunk. Meanwhile, the girl calmly agreed to sit with them and even asked to feed her. When the main character was walking down the corridor, Hashizaki stopped him for a serious conversation. It turned out that she could control the liquids that had left the body, but not those that were under the skin. If I had such an ability, she sighed, it would be a great opportunity to test this creepy colleague. As a sign of reconciliation, Hashizaki handed him some rolls. She remembered that he liked plums, but not too sour ones, and her friend suggested that the combination with eggs would soften the taste. The girl asked to eat them at home, but Suzuka, being vigilant, took a portion first. What if there was poison in there? Sasaki, having tried it, was pleased with the taste, and Purple, to enhance the impression, generously poured mayonnaise on her rolls. In a dense forest there is a mysterious guy, mercilessly killing people with his sharp blade. Nearby, a stranger is released from captivity, but he does not even suspect who his savior is. Meanwhile, the guys are calmly watching a movie, while Sasaki is enthusiastically photographing his unusual pet. In the palace, a crowd of important people has gathered around the king, and the monarch announces that their country is on the verge of an unprecedented crisis. The destruction of the empire that occurred in this world was not an accident, it was the work of 2 great criminals. The king predicts that their countries will meet in a decisive battle, and in order to return to their former greatness, he is forced to take a number of radical measures. All heirs to the throne will have the right to participate in the affairs of the Kingdom of Hertz, and in 5 years the throne will go to the one who shows the best results. The guy standing in the crowd confirms that he heard everything. He was one of the first to learn about the end of the war. At this time, customers are vying with each other to praise a local merchant, when suddenly a horse rushes past them and almost knocks them down. The rider rudely complains that they are in the way. Meanwhile, the protagonist carefully examines the items. Everything is ready for shipment. Having packed a suitcase, they decide to visit Mark. An excited maid comes in and hands them a letter from Count Miller. Sasaki notices that the guards are behaving much less friendly this time than on their last visit. He secludes himself with Miller, and the Count explains the new royal decrees. These measures will primarily hit the nobility. After the war, the king seriously thought about the future of the state, and allowed all heirs to participate in political life. The one who shows himself best will eventually lead the kingdom. Most of the nobles have already divided into supporters of the first and second princes. The confrontation between the factions has intensified so much that there are already the first casualties. Muller insistently asks Sasaki to temporarily leave the kingdom in the neighboring republic. The Count has connections that will help with emigration, and there he can achieve success. However, the protagonist firmly refuses. He intends to continue trading here. At this moment, an envoy from the trading house enters the chambers with disturbing news. Mark was arrested for insulting a nobleman when he was almost hit by a horse, in obvious setup. Most likely, the trap was set by Mark's boss, the head of the trading house. It all began after the war. Mark, having learned about its end before others, showed business acumen and received a solid profit, while the head of the house, Hermann, was busy with his affairs at court. With the support of the Count, Mark tried to open a branch of the company in order to move the main office to the capital. However, the successes of his subordinate alerted Hermann they threatened not only the new branch, but also his own position. Count Ritrich, having learned about this situation, saw a chance to strike a blow to his eternal rival Muller, and developed an insidious plan against Mark. Muller hands Sasaki his family dagger. Now every word of the protagonist will be perceived as if it was spoken by the Count himself. They get into the carriage. The war for the throne has escalated. Ritrich supports the first prince and tries to eliminate Muller, a supporter of the second heir, using human envy as a weapon. Sasaki decides to act with charm, not force. Approaching the guards, he receives a warning to be careful. Count Ritrich's knights will appear soon. The protagonist visits Mark in prison. All traces of beatings have already disappeared from the prisoner's face. He explains that he learned about the situation from the messenger, and Count Muller is taking steps to prove his innocence. Sasaki asks the knight to tell the Count that it was Mark who brought in the main income. He hints to the guard that he values this merchant even more than the second prince. Then the protagonist goes to Joseph with a proposal to create a new trading house in the city and asks for support. He demonstrates various exotic goods that he wants to sell. Joseph is cautious. Doing business with a native of the Hertz kingdom is too risky. Sasaki offers a compromise. When he brings the goods, he will sell most of them to one company, and the payment can be any. He plans to name the new company in honor of Mark. After discussing the details, they buy hot dogs and sit down on a bench. Meanwhile, Pai has collected a lot of useful information on the internet. He is especially interested in the fact that there is much less gold in this world. They decide to sell coins from the old world as a rare collectible. After discussing their plans, they return to the city. Elsa is talking with French about Mark's fate. Her father is already trying to negotiate his release. Sasaki copes with things faster than expected. A maid approaches him with a message about unexpected guests. A conversation about Mark begins. The main character does not hide the fact that he cooperates with the Count. At this point, Pai appears, and Elsa freezes in surprise when she hears the bird talking. She cries out in delight that the great sage has finally made contact with her. Only Muller knows the truth about Pai. If the secret is revealed, many will leave the city. They symbolically touch each other, as if making a deal. The protagonist finishes packing the boxes with goods. This should be enough for the first time. The maid comes again with news of the guest. Having hammered in the last nails, they prepare to teleport. Futari looks at the large boxes with curiosity. When they open one of them, it turns out that Elsa secretly snuck inside and teleported along with them. The guard methodically walks the streets of the city in search of the missing lady, carefully checking every alley. The other guys also join the search, but so far all their efforts have been in vain. Purple, looking around, comes to an unexpected conclusion. It turns out that ordinary people also live in the world of fairies, and those living stones on her head are not decorative at all, but real. Sasaki politely asks to leave them alone for at least a couple of minutes, despite the girl's obvious curiosity. After some thought, she still agrees to move away. Pai calms the protagonist, explaining that Purple does not understand their language, just as they do not understand the speech of the inhabitants of his world. All this is thanks to a magic filter that transforms words. Elsa, crossing her arms over her chest, expresses a suspicion that all this is a carefully planned provocation. After all, Mark was arrested just on the day of their arrival, and Sasaki, having promised to help, simply threw gold bars into the boxes and left. The protagonist, sighing heavily, explains his plan. These bars are needed to conclude an important deal with one woman, which will help free Mark. However, Elsa's unexpected appearance jeopardizes the entire operation. Suddenly, Shizuka attacks the girl, and Pai immediately enters the fight. The bird, initially planning to simply get rid of the uninvited guest, changes its mind at the last moment, and casts a cunning curse on her. The girl tries to rush forward, but stumbles and falls. Strange marks are already appearing on her right hand, which will spread across her body with each attempt to harm the owners of this world. If the marks cover her entire body, only lifeless flesh will remain, and no regeneration will help. Despite the warning, the girl tries to attack again, and the marks immediately increase in size. Elsa, in a trembling voice, demands an explanation. What kind of place is this and what is going on? To win her trust, she is offered to see the local sights. They go on a ferry ride. A strong wind ruffles Elsa's hair, and her eyes shine with delight at the sight of an unfamiliar city. Gradually, it dawns on her that there is nothing like this in her home country, as well as in all the kingdoms she knows. Sasaki, catching her thoughtful look, explains that he wants to establish trade between the two worlds, although deep down he admits to himself that he does this primarily for the sake of incredibly delicious food. Purple, meanwhile, also wants to contribute to the education of the guests. She provided the girl with appropriate clothes and is now choosing a beautiful kimono for her, while the protagonist shows them the local tower. They spend time visiting various interesting places, simply enjoying life and unusual impressions. When Elsa is given a taste of a local delicacy, her face lights up with a happy smile. She has never tried anything like this. Their peaceful pastime is interrupted by a group of journalists trying to interview the girl live on air. Sasaki quickly covers her with himself. Such attention could cause a lot of problems. At that moment, a boy falls into the water nearby, and Elsa, without thinking, uses magic to save him. Shizuka quickly breaks the cameras and, with a light touch of her finger, plunges the overly curious reporters into a short sleep. After that, they hastily leave to act according to a prearranged protocol. Returning to the boss, the protagonist prepares for a serious conversation, but Akutsu, to his surprise, does not ask questions about the unexpected companion. The boss is interested in details about the previous organization where rank B espers worked, especially about who had the ability of telekinesis and was with her last time. The girl is explained that this is a kind of exam, and Sasaki will provide her support. Elsa, meanwhile, is eager to learn as much as possible about this world in order to bring valuable knowledge to her kingdom. This could help her father not only through a profitable marriage. However, the protagonist is categorically against it. In this world, each resident is assigned a personal number, and foreigners are especially closely monitored. Her unusual appearance will immediately attract the attention of law enforcement officers, and the first encounter will end in prison. If something happens to her, he will not be able to look Muller in the eye. Pai, trying to defuse the situation, explains that their world is not so weak. Most weapons are based on thermal and shock effects, and are also limited in time of use and cost. If you build a protective barrier in advance, you can withstand any attack, although some monsters are truly immune to shock waves and heat such immediately rush to attack. The bird asks Elsa to relax. They are not going to attack anyone. The girl understands that her father will most likely be terribly angry with her. Any caring parent worries about their child. Pai calms her down. They will try to explain everything so that the count does not get too angry. Besides, they are partly to blame themselves, not having properly checked the cargo before sending it. At this time, a strange guy in a hat walks along the distant path, holding a mysterious musical flask in his hands, emitting bizarre sounds. The protagonist, observing this scene, with a slight smile notes that the bird, apparently, teaches the girl not quite what it should. Their conversation is interrupted by the appearance of Purple, who considers herself indebted to Sasaki. She checked the quality of the goods and confirms that they meet all the requirements. The protagonist, seeing that the main business is settled, offers to take Elsa back home, to which she, after some thought, agrees. French is solemnly handed an elegant dagger, and a small gift so that he can treat Mark in prison. When he comes to the cell, we see how the prison guard hands the prisoner a neatly packed lunchbox, and a frightened mouse flashes in the corner of the cell. At this time, Elsa, slightly trembling, approaches her father and, lowering her eyes, asks for forgiveness for her escape. Count Muller, without saying a word, hugs his daughter tightly, showing that everything has already been forgotten. Pai, watching this touching scene, gently reminds them that the blame lies with them and that no one should be blamed. Meanwhile, it turns out that the meeting with Count Ritrich did not bring the desired results. The negotiations ended in nothing. At this moment, a breathless maid runs into the chambers with the news that an unexpected guest has arrived. One of Muller's sons, walking along the long corridor, notices how Elsa is pressed against the door, clearly eavesdropping on the adults' conversation. He sternly asks her not to run away and eavesdrop anymore. The unexpected guest turns out to be Hermann, who, sighing heavily, apologizes for all the inconveniences associated with Mark's arrest. His face is covered in sweat when he tells the terrible news. Count Ritrich has ordered Mark to be executed in the coming days. Let him atone for his guilt, Hermann says, urging them not to interfere. Pai immediately realizes that this is a ridiculous performance, while Muller decides to go to the Count himself, perhaps offering him monetary compensation. It becomes clear that the relationship between Count Ritrich and Hermann is very complicated. It is not without reason that the main branch of the guild suddenly moved to the capital. Muller, clenching his fists, talks about Ritrich as a talented but unprincipled politician, one of the few who deals with the internal affairs of the kingdom. He will stop at nothing to achieve his goals, the Count notes bitterly, describing him as a virtuoso manipulator. Their families have been feuding for several generations. They once even fought over land, and now, apparently, Ritrich has decided to finally ruin the Mullers. Sasaki insists on accompanying the Count to these dangerous negotiations. On the way, while the carriage sways on the potholes, the guy tries to cheer Muller up, although he himself does not feel particularly confident. In his pocket, he carefully keeps a small souvenir for the negotiations. When they finally arrive at Ritrich's house, Sasaki can't hide his surprise at the unexpected blonde Count. Ritrich is studying some documents at this time, nervously tapping his fingers on the table when a servant announces unexpected guests. Sasaki, taking a deep breath, presents the Count with an unusual gift of acquaintance, a portable radio that allows communication over a distance. It turns out that Ritrich has already been told about the protagonist's wonderful goods, including some mysterious ground digital machines. The Count, crossing his arms over his chest, issues an ultimatum. Now all goods must pass through him. Only then will he agree to release Mark. Otherwise, the execution will take place as scheduled. Sasaki asks for a month to think it over. Mark's life has become really important to him. They have managed to become close during this time. Returning, the protagonist runs into a frightened French, who heard something from the guards about the upcoming execution. Muller leaves on urgent business, leaving Sasaki alone, but Pai promises to help for a modest fee of half a kilo of meat. Meanwhile, Hermann, red with anger, shouts at Ritrich the execution was unexpectedly postponed, ruining his plans. The next day, he and the maid carry a heavy box, and as a token of gratitude, the girl receives several coins. Sasaki decides to sell all the remaining goods to raise the necessary amount. Pai quickly delivers the cargo to Joseph, who is amazed by the quantity and quality of the goods brought. The protagonist promises to bring twice as much next time and prefers to be paid in cash. Matisse suddenly appears, and Joseph begins to discuss some business with him. It turns out that Matisse worked in the south, engaged in lending, but the withdrawal of imperial troops disrupted all his plans. Sasaki is surprised to recognize in him the same man he once saw in the carriage. Meanwhile, the maid girl patiently waits at the door for the protagonist to return. After waiting for quite a long time, she decides to eavesdrop on what is going on inside. What if he has a day off today? When she puts her ear to the door, it suddenly swings open, almost knocking her off her feet. The protagonist is running along a dusty road when an angry phone call catches up with him. It turns out he missed an important meeting 3 hours ago. Luckily, a taxi stops nearby, agreeing to take him to the right place. At this time, worried maids, brothers and sister of Elsa have gathered at the Muller house. Everyone is waiting for their father to return. Finally, a carriage drives up with a rumble, and the tired Count gets out of it. French is brought to Mark, where he whispers to his friend to be patient a little longer. They will definitely come up with something. At this time, Hermann, sipping expensive wine, maliciously notes that today is the appointed day of execution, which means that their opponents did not take advantage of the opportunity provided. But his triumph is interrupted by the unexpected appearance of a servant with some paper. Looking at it, Hermann turns pale with surprise. It is his credit history from the central bank. French is encouraged to remain himself and not to worry, so that everything goes well. At this moment, a smart carriage drives up to the mansion, from which Ritrich and the freed Mark get out. The protagonist specially chose this cozy place with an excellent kitchen to please Mark with delicious dishes during the negotiations. Count Muller solemnly enters the hall, accompanied by Prince Adonis, and everyone decides to start the long-awaited meeting to finally discuss everything. Adonis, it turns out, came not only for negotiations. He sincerely wants to try new exotic dishes and expand his gastronomic horizons. A lively conversation begins at the table. If other countries agree to the proposed conditions, this plan can really work. Ritrich does not hide his admiration for the protagonist. His beauty, intelligence, and demeanor evoke genuine respect, and the Count considers it an honor to sit next to him. Prince Adonis politely but firmly asks for the release of the merchant Mark, offering to fully compensate for any damage. It seems that everyone present is ready to agree, when suddenly the protagonist abruptly declares that this is completely unacceptable, including in relation to himself. He explains that he sells goods exclusively on the instructions of His Highness, who has shown a special interest in him and ordered him to work only with those he completely trusts. Therefore, he cooperates with this particular trading house. Sasaki offers an alternative price for Mark's release from prison, and to everyone's surprise, Ritrich, after a short thought, agrees. Hermann, sitting nearby, is clearly unhappy with this turn of events and tries to whisper to convince his ally. Ritrich, frowning, explains that the merchant seriously offended his noble honor, and this insult requires appropriate compensation, a whole 1,000 gold coins. For a nobleman, such a sum is mere trifles, but after it is paid, he is ready to release Mark. Sasaki, without hesitation, agrees to pay the entire amount, although he understands that it will not be easy to collect such money in a short time. As a compromise, he offers to give 500 coins at once, and the rest within a week. The protagonist passionately explains that Mark's life is priceless to him, and he is ready to pay any money, because the loss of a friend would be a real tragedy for him. He sincerely cares about the fate of this country, because this is his friend's homeland, and all the local nobles are, in a sense, his brothers. These words unexpectedly find a response in the soul of Ritrich. He understands that all the previous threats were just a game, and now, touched by the sincerity of the protagonist, refuses the money, generously returning the merchant. His decision is based on deep respect for Highness, before whom he is ready to bow his head. However, Hermann is furious. He begins to shout that this was not part of their agreement, and is now afraid of the wrath of other nobles. He threatens to tell the Marquis and the rest of the nobility everything, and if Ritrich reneges on his words, his reputation will be destroyed. At this tense moment, Joseph appears, who did not expect to meet a member of the royal family here at all. Only now does he understand who he is dealing with. The Kempler Trading Company, which he represents, has enormous influence in this world, surpassing even the power of the Hertz Kingdom. In fact, this is a meeting between the head of a powerful corporation and the prince of a developing monarchy, and Joseph is even higher in status than Adonis. After exchanging pleasantries with Richard and Hermann, a breathless servant runs into the room with news someone bought out all their debts related to moving to the capital without their knowledge. Joseph, raising an eyebrow, asks for an explanation. It seems that Sasaki has prepared a surprise by paying off all the war debts and at the same time settling issues with the trading house. It turns out that this case is closely connected with Count Richrich and is an ideal location for Mark's new trading house. If he cannot pay, the case will go to Sasaki. Everyone goes outside, where Mark, blinded by the sunlight after the dungeon, warmly thanks everyone for his release. Joseph gets to know him with interest and already anticipates future cooperation. Meanwhile, the protagonist sits by the lake, sipping soda and thinking about the fact that the outcome of the case could have been any, so he prepared several plans. The first plan was to enlist the support of Prince Adonis and use his authority in the royal hierarchy. This is a strong trump card. As a knight managing the kingdom's finances, he did not want to play on the patriotic feelings of the count, but he was sure that the prince's word would make the right impression. If necessary, he was ready to pay the ransom. Joseph helped to find out all the details. It turned out that one of the counts was mired in debt and desperately needed money. Sasaki also asked Purple to urgently prepare the goods, and their delivery was even faster than the courier. Now that everything ended well, he and Pai decide to celebrate their success with the most expensive and delicious meat they can find. They come to the building and are surprised, because everything around was under fire, and in general people were shooting at them, leaving behind only destruction and fear. He slowly walks to Purple, because he once promised to come to her, despite all the dangers that surround them. He heals her with his magic, feeling how the energy flows from his body into her wounds, and the girl herself would not refuse such power, because it brings her relief. She carefully shows her hand, demonstrating that the symbols have not increased and she has done nothing wrong, trying to convince him of her innocence. They are still being shot at, because her organization wants to kill her, leaving no chance for salvation. Pai calmly explains that they can't just run away with their tails between their legs either, because then they will be caught sooner or later. He decides to figure it out himself, taking responsibility on his shoulders, and that's it, no longer wanting to hide. Her former leader of their cell suddenly comes to them. His appearance is like a bolt from the blue. The guy easily gives physical form to his imagination, materializing thoughts into reality, and the range of his capabilities is so large that few people know about all his abilities. He thinks with a cold look that the girl now has a new man, at whose expense she lives, not understanding the true motives of their relationship. She did not want to return to them, feeling betrayed, and in this case she could become a serious problem for them if she decided to act against them. They quietly ask Sasaki for help, begging him to intervene, because if he helps, they will be able to at least escape, and not die here and now. He thought that fighting a clone was a bad idea, because if something happened, she would churn out new ones, and then their strength would be exhausted. And what about a crowd that could kill with a touch? Even escaping would be difficult if they decided to attack together. Pai concentrated and created a teleporter, feeling how the space around them distorted, and they instantly moved to the warehouse, leaving their pursuers behind. She thought in despair that she was already finished, because they were caught by surprise, and the enemies seemed to know about her actions in advance, as if they read her thoughts. His presence complicated everything greatly, although she still had to complete her mission no matter what. She had an urgent offer. If they helped her get to the bureau, she would organize any deals, no matter how crazy, and if necessary, she was ready to work abroad, just to survive. Last time she had sinned against them, and now all future deals would be conducted on an equal footing, without the previous privileges. Sasaki decides to think about her words and share his plan later, realizing that haste could ruin everything. A window in the warehouse is suddenly broken, and the same pursuers come to them again, leaving them no time to rest. A close friend told him about their location, and he would never have thought that they worked in the bureau, because it was a complete surprise. He knows perfectly well where they have been, because it was enough to simply check the city cameras, tracking their every step. Most likely, he followed them from Shaodong Station when they were carelessly looking at the sights, not even suspecting that they were being watched. Perhaps they have been cooperating with Itsuro for a long time, and also, probably, they hope that they will kill each other, saving them from unnecessary work. The guy threw grenades at them without hesitation, and Pai instantly took them all out, although he himself was scared, realizing how dangerous it was. The bird immediately looked up information on the internet about grenades, because they are strictly prohibited in their country, and their use is punishable by law. He thinks about buying him a phone so that he can watch more useful information and be aware of what is happening. Pai quickly flies to him, switching to combat mode, preparing for a possible fight. The dark fallen angel mercilessly makes hellfire to incinerate everyone who stands in his way, leaving them no chance of salvation. The bird cold-bloodedly removes it, and is not even surprised, because for her there is nothing unusual in this. His spell was similar to one of the games, and it could only be obtained if there was a certain ring that gave such power. Apparently, he materialized it, and now he could even make unreal things real, playing with reality as he wants. Then the guy creates a huge flame, trying to burn everything around, and Sasaki in response makes a strong barrier, protecting himself and his allies. Pai flaps his wings, creating a powerful wind, and removes this fire, preventing it from spreading further. Then he attacks him again with fire, but his attack is again prevented, and then he has a new ring, enhancing his already dangerous abilities. An ancient artifact materializes in his hands, and it erases everything it touches, destroying everything in its path. The bird is strictly told not to touch the sword under any circumstances, otherwise the consequences will be unpredictable. He was also interested in his strength, although he looked down on him, not taking him seriously. The guy lifts him up, trying to deliver a decisive blow to finish him off once and for all. Suddenly, he is attacked from the side, and the blow hits the wing, causing him severe pain, and Sasaki screams for no one to come closer, otherwise he can be hit too. When they return, he will definitely buy him meat and a phone with unlimited internet, as promised. His clone suddenly disappears, and the guy in glasses starts to panic, because he doesn't know what this ability is and how to fight it. Pai calmly explains that when a person stops learning new things, his soul gradually dies, and then the body dies, leaving only an empty shell. He's already tired of everything, and he asks to just take everything they want, because he quickly gave up, seeing no point in further resistance. Sasaki understands that he can't just let him go, because he can become a threat again. They weren't so friendly with the chief, and he himself will tell the chief everything about this fight, because the bureau doesn't know about his true abilities. And they have no need to be hostile if they can find a common language. Shizuka sincerely thanks him for his help and promises that from now on he will organize warehouses especially for him. He asks for 300 tons per week and adds that he may not pay for delivery if the conditions are met. The protagonist suddenly gets a call saying that they urgently need to bring Purple to the bureau, because the ferry has already arrived there, and they can't do without her. The public was officially informed that this was a major terrorist attack that resulted in serious destruction. About an hour ago, they received an alarming message that the same sorceress had appeared and broken into the bureau's headquarters, this time bringing her friend with her. They arrived here at the request of the chief, understanding the seriousness of the situation. Pai was insistently asked to stay home, although many employees were already dealing with the problem on the spot, trying to take control of the situation. The sorceress named Pink acted with incredible scope, mercilessly hitting buildings, because her only goal was to kill as many espers as possible. People in a panic held weapons, as well as various guns, preparing to fight back. They were urgently asked to come as soon as possible, although if they had taken Pai, the matter would have been resolved in no time, but they could not risk that no one would find out about the existence of the bird. People with trembling hands held pistols and hesitantly aimed at them, but were clearly afraid of these two girls, despite their fragile appearance. When suddenly, Pink hit them, demonstrating her ruthless strength. The girls mockingly said that now even little girls are being shot, although they understood perfectly well that it was useless against their abilities. The bureau workers were screaming in panic, some asked to retreat, others demanded to attack, creating complete confusion. Two guys, keeping their cool, approached them and began to quickly discuss a possible plan of action. Sasaki confidently suggests a water attack, because it was already clear that an ordinary person cannot pass through the barrier, which means that if you fill it with water, the enemies can drown and will be forced to remove the protection. Shizuka decides to help him, but tries not to get in the way, realizing that the main thing is not to disrupt their strategy. In general, the most they wanted was for the pink-haired girl to lose consciousness, and for the second one to use the barrier to retreat, weakening their onslaught. The most important thing for them now is for Shizuka to prove herself and become a real star in the bureau, earning the respect of her colleagues. Hashizaki loudly orders to attack, because they finally have a clear plan that gives them a chance to win. Everyone decides to run at them, trying to remove the barrier by any means, but the first attempts are futile. Then they decide to act more harshly and just smear everyone, and Sasaki comes forward, ready for decisive action. Water suddenly begins to form inside their barrier, and they make a small hole so that it can leak inside. However, their plan partially fails when the hole suddenly freezes, and the enemies begin to drown again, unable to escape. Shizuka appears near them, carefully sticking her hand through the barrier, trying to grab one of the girls. The pink-haired girl faints abruptly, and the second, overcome with rage, holds her in her arms, not understanding what happened. She swears revenge and makes a powerful blow, but the protagonist creates a shield in time, blocking the attack. They are threatened, shouting that they will still answer for this, because their faces have already been remembered, and the next meeting will be the last. After that, they hastily leave through the teleport to recover from what happened and prepare for a new clash. Shizuka is instantly surrounded by people pointing guns at her, not giving the slightest chance for resistance. The boss himself approaches them, who initially wanted to take the fairies into custody, but to his disappointment, it did not work out. Thanks to Purple, they were able to prevent this terrorist attack, preventing even more victims. The girl will not even be surprised if they decide to attack again, because she knows how stubborn and ruthless their enemies are. Akutsu, having thought it over, decides to officially accept her into their ranks, notifying that confirmation will come in 2 days. The boss takes Sasaki aside, wanting to discuss something important. He starts talking about the water in the barrier, because he was told that if you often use power, it expands your potential, opening up new opportunities. The boss was also informed that before arriving at headquarters, Sasaki was in a very strange place, which raised questions. Perhaps the boss suspected them no less than they did, and since he decided to accept the girl into the ranks, he apparently already discussed everything with that bespectacled man. Akutsu demands a detailed report from him, because they fought with the very organization that the girl used to be in, and this is a serious reason for proceedings. The man confidently explains that the girl will be an excellent employee, bringing great benefit to their company. They can also share secret information with her without fear of leaks. He goes into the nearest store and buys a drink, looking like he just solved the problem he created for everyone. Now he needs to train more, improving his skills, so that he can be even more effective next time. The girl sits near his door again, worriedly telling him that she heard a strange voice coming from inside. Sasaki calmly explains that it is just his friend and there is nothing to worry about. He treats her with various tasty things and says goodbye warmly, watching her leave. The guy thinks that it is time for them to move to another, safer place, where Pai will have his own room. He returns home and begins to tell the bird about everything that happened during this long day. The man bought some meat, and now they can cook something delicious. They cook together on the stove, and then eat everything with appetite. The protagonist fondly remembers how he first met the bird, because it completely changed his life, making it brighter and more interesting. Back then, he sadly said that he couldn't afford such meat, but now they eat it together. Of course, it's not exactly what he expected from life, but it's still wonderful. Meanwhile, Pai has prepared calculations about the time distortions between worlds. Initially, 1 day in his world was equal to 1 month in the other, but now everything is changing rapidly, perhaps cyclically. Suddenly, there is a knock on the wall, and the neighbors ask them to be quieter. They decide to turn on the TV to drown out their voices and not attract unnecessary attention. On TV, a mysterious creature was shown that suddenly appeared in the sky and was spotted near the parking lot of a store. No one could figure out what it was, but one thing was clear: the situation was getting stranger.